Alright guys, my name is Metagoblin and today I'm going to be giving you my classic World of Warcraft Shaman leveling guide. As always, these guides will cover a number of topics. First of all, we'll have an FAQ section, primarily talking about what weapon buff to use. Then we'll go through the optimal talent build. Then we'll go through the rotation and playstyle, you know, how to kill things fast. Then we'll talk about gear and stats. Then we'll go through the weapon progression, and lastly I'll finish off with some money saving tips. Just before I jump in guys, please do give me a quick follow on Twitch, as when the game comes out I'll be streaming a lot on Twitch. But anyway, let's run through this FAQ section. The first question people are most likely to ask when they start playing a Shaman is, what weapon buff should I use? The simple answer is that you should always be using Rockbiter weapon. Mathematically, it provides the most DPS out of the other options when you are using a slow two-handed weapon, right, which is a weapon type you want to go for. The reason Wind Fury isn't more viable is because a lot of the time Wind Fury will proc too late in a fight and it will just overkill the enemy, which means it's just less efficient than the Rockbiter. The second FAQ is, what weapon should I use? The answer is a slow two-handed weapon. Sometimes this could even be a staff. It's important to pay attention to the actual total weapon DPS on the weapon, particularly the maximum damage number, as this will allow Rockbiter to improve the DPS even more. I'd recommend hovering over your melee DPS stat in your character window when comparing weapons to determine which weapon that you currently have is the best. So let me run through the optimal talent build. It's important to note, guys, that people in the community will argue kind of excessively over, you know, one little talent point put here or there. The point is that it's only going to make like a 0.5% difference anyway, so that's just something to bear in mind. This is a talent build that, you know, most people in the community are going to go for, so that's the build I've chosen to feature in this guide. So for this part of the video I'm going to go through the talents very quickly just to show you what the talent build looks like. So first of all, you max out Ancestral Knowledge, then you go into Thundering Strikes, and then from here, if you have an axe or a mace available to you that you've been waiting to equip, then yeah, fair enough, go for this talent, but you know, you can get it a little bit later, it doesn't really matter. You know, you can get Improved Ghost Wolf early if you want to. From here we get 2 points into Anticipation, because the other talents are just really useless, and a little bit of extra dodge is probably the most useful here. And really it's only just to get down the tree. Then you're going to max out Flurry, because that's really massive DPS improvement. Elemental Weapons improves Rockbiter weapon, that's why we want that really badly. The parry chance, the reason why we, you know, get parry, first of all, is because of the avoidance that it provides, you know, a little bit of damage reduction, but also because it's actually marginally a DPS increase, because after you parry an attack, your next attack occurs faster, so it's just like a minor DPS improvement as well. Then you get into 1 point into Anticipation, just to get further down the tree. And then we'll spec into Weapon Mastery, and then we'll go into Storm Strike. From here we're going to go into the Elemental tree. Now most people are going to max out Convection, go to Call of the Flame, and then go back to Concussion until they unlock Elemental Focus, and then they're going to get whatever this talent's called. Well, most people actually carry on to max out this talent, and then get Elemental Devastation as early as possible, and then just finish off, you know, with that talent until level 60. I personally wouldn't do this because I just find Concussion to be such a minor DPS increase. I just don't enjoy it that much. I just don't feel like it's massively useful. I think there are other talents here which are more useful, particularly Elemental Warding, you know, extra, you know, 10% damage reduction. That's pretty significant, you know, in all spells. And Earth's Grasp is a really underrated ability, primarily for Earthbind chitin, which we'll be talking about later, and also because Stoneclaw Totem is actually a really underrated totem which can be used in dungeons to absolutely save the group from wiping. And then obviously go into Elemental Focus, and then really you just want to get Elemental Devastation. It's only the most useful talent in the Elemental tree, obviously for obvious reasons, and then just finish off. So yeah, it's up to you. I mean, you can go for the, you know, more defensive approach, or you can go for that, you know, that very minuscule 5% damage buff on your shock and lightning bolt spells. It's really up to you. So let's run through the rotation and playstyle section. There are 2 rotations I'm going to give you. The low level rotation, which is only up until about when you get Searing Totem and Flame Shock, and then the rotation entirely changes. Okay, first lesson we need to learn about the Shaman rotation is this technique called front loading. Okay, it's basically a technique used to maximize mana efficiency when solo leveling. Basically, in Classic, your mana will only begin regenerating after 5 seconds of not casting a single spell, so we want to be entering our mana regenerating phase as early in the fight as possible, which is why we front load our damage. We cast all our spells in a chunk at the beginning of the fight, and let our melee attacks damage and other damage over time effects to rot down the enemy down until death. Meanwhile, while we're not using any spells, our mana is just progressively regenerating, and if we apply this technique, we basically have really good mana efficiency when we're chain pulling enemies. So let's go through the low level rotation. Obviously the first thing to note is always remember to keep your weapon buffed with rock biter weapon. But here's the rotation. First of all, buff with lightning shield. Secondly, pull with lightning bolt, then cast an earth shock, before he gets into melee range, and then you just kind of melee him to death and it's all happy days. You may, if you have the mana for it, if you feel like you can push your combat efficiency even further, you can pull with 2 lightning bolts before he gets into melee range. Then when he's in melee range, you can obviously cast the instant cast earth shock without any penalty to your casting time, because there is no casting time. And let's move on to the higher level rotation. First of all, you want to buff with lightning shield, then you pull with flame shock, then you pop your searing totem, then you let a melee swing occur before using storm strike, and then you just finish him off with melee attacks. Obviously if you don't have storm strike available, then you just kind of ignore that part and just melee him to death. And after you've used that storm strike, you shouldn't be casting another ability after, since it will ruin your mana efficiency, because that will trigger the 5-second cooldown again and basically reset it. Remember, sometimes you can save even more mana by pulling more than one enemy into your searing totem rather than having to resummon it. You can just run a little bit further, aggro a mob and get him to run back to your searing totem. That will save even more mana. When it comes to taking down more than one enemy, this is when I would recommend ignoring the front loading technique and trying to burn your mana more in order to kill the first enemy as fast as possible, because the longer you have 2 mobs hitting you, the higher chance you're actually going to be killed, because the more damage you're going to be taking. So, don't hesitate to reapply lightning shield, reapply flame shock, or use a second storm strike, right? You may even want to consider using the earthbind totem kiting technique. It's basically similar to the hamstring kiting technique, where you strafe in between melee attacks to avoid taking melee damage. However, I have heard that this kind of kiting technique isn't working on the classic World of Warcraft beta. Well, it didn't before it was taken down, so that's why I'm not 100% sure whether this is going to be a useful tactic, but nonetheless, experiment with it when the game launches. So when it comes to choosing your gear pieces, you have 2 options. You can prioritize stacking spirit, which will reduce your downtime massively, and when stacked high enough you'll be able to chain pull without even stopping to drink once. Or you could stack DPS stats like agility and strength, agility being a priority since it provides slightly better DPS since it increases your critical strike chance. When you stack DPS stats, you will have faster kill times by probably 1 or 2 seconds, but increased downtime and less mana efficiency. Personally, it's up to you. I like to prioritize kind of the best of both worlds. I'd recommend stacking spirit as your first priority, and then stacking agility gear or strength gear as a second priority. So really want to be going for gear pieces with strength and spirit or agility and spirit. For our weapon progression, I'll link a bit of a Google Drive document in the description of the video. Just bear in mind that sometimes staff options have better DPS, and they are especially useful if you have a high spirit stat. So lastly, I'm going to finish off with some money saving tips to save your mount at level 40, because if you don't have enough money to buy a mount at level 40, your leveling time is going to be massively increased, because while you could be on your mount running, you're going to be running around being really slow. So first tip is to get skinning and then start vendoring the leather that you don't need. Second tip is to make friends with a tailor as soon as you can to get him to make you some bags, because the more inventory space you have means the more trash loot you can loot, which means the more money you can generate. Thirdly, I'd recommend trying out first aid, because you're going to be spending less money on food and all that kind of thing. It's also just generally quite useful in combat as well. I'd also recommend doing a bit of cooking to make food for yourself, and obviously if the food isn't useful to you, you can vendor it for even more money. And my last note to both these 2 last points is to only do crafting when you're waiting for spawns to appear, you're waiting for a boss or something, or you're waiting for the boat, because stopping to craft and do professions is going to slow you down. So only do it when you have to stop and wait anyway. That's my first recommendation. 6th tip is to stop buying food and water, and just try and ask a mage whenever you see one. Ideally you should be stacking spirit gear to the point where you really don't need food as well, and that will stop you from ever needing to buy food, which will save a ridiculous amount of money. 7th tip is to check quest item money reward. You might need an add-on for this, but so obviously certain items that you get from quests are going to cost more money to a vendor than others, so always pick the one that's going to cost the most money and vendor the most expensive option. That will get you some decent money in the long run. And my 8th tip is just to quickly make a banco. You know, if you are in the world and you loot mats that you know for a fact are going to sell more of the auction house, then you can just send them to your banco. You can leave them in the mail up to 30 days and relog that character later on. You know, you might get into a situation where you're close to level 40. You might want to log your banco, and just put some mats on the auction house to generate a little bit of extra money. But anyway, that's where I'm going to end the video, guys. My name is Metagoblin. Until my next video, ciao.